back again with another book-ish type of video. I will keep force feeding you guys book content and you will enjoy it. Hi, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you've never been here before. Today I'm going to be doing a year wrap-up. These are the best books I've read in 2022. I've read some amazing, impeccable books, but these ones all got 5 stars or at least a 4.5. Nothing below a 4.5. So you're getting good recommendations from me. I have here 15 books out of the 34 that I've read this year so far. I'm currently reading some because it's not the end of the year yet. I'm someone that likes to read to the very last second of the year so I can actually get a full view of my total amount of books that I've read for the year. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get into it. Now, this isn't going to be in any particular order, but I do have a number one, or at least 2 books that deserve the number 1 spot. So, no particular order, but we have kind of a recent read, and that is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I just finished this, I think sometime, well, not just, I finished this about middle of November, maybe early November, late October. And let me tell you, this book really surprised me. It was a lot more funny than I thought it was going to be, and it was very accessible. Now, sometimes I felt my brain kind of like difficult to put the visuals together because I'm not the biggest fan of fantasy. Mostly the genre that I am drawn to is historical or literary fiction, which fantasy usually isn't. But luckily this one has pictures throughout, so that helps me, get a better sense of what I'm dealing with. So I really enjoyed this one. I don't remember if I actually gave a specific rating on Storygraph, which if you want to follow me on that, that's going to be in my description. But I would say I think this is maybe 4.5 or maybe a 5. I can't make that decision right now, but I really, really enjoyed this book. Next, we have a very short book, but one that I'm kind of surprised I've never read before. It was never required for me. That is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I got this copy when I was on my honeymoon in Hawaii, so this copy is kind of special to me. This was also very readable. I am a classics bitch. Like, I am drawn to classics. So, and I know that's not really common for a lot of people. I feel like people kind of like something that's very accessible, something that might be a little bit more modern. I don't. I don't know why. I like the old-timey bitches. So this was also amazing, spectacular. I think the story was just told really well, and I was kind of worried that it was gonna be not feeling complete because it is so short. It's literally 115 pages, but nope, it wrapped up nicely, and I didn't feel any lingering wanting of it to be wrapped up in a different type of way. So I really, really, really like this one. Okay, the next one is actually a series, but I only have the first one, and that is the Heartstopper series. Now, I've been wanting to get into graphic novels lately, but I didn't really know where to start, and everyone's been raving about the Heartstopper series, so I was like, why not? And I bought the first one, and I loved it. It is a great way to bulk up how many books you read, but also it is so nice if you don't want to work your brain too much. If you just want to look at nice pictures, if you want to just read a cute story. Not all of them are young adult. Oh yeah, see, so cute. Not all of graphic novels are young adult. There are some adult, some nonfiction, some memoirs, so it doesn't have to be YA. It can be an adult graphic novel, but I highly encourage you guys, if you haven't, to read at least Heartstopper, or just try to get into graphic novels, because I know I'm definitely more interested in them after reading this series. It was very wholesome, very cute, and I wanted nothing more than this. There is another book coming out, I don't know when, so I read the first 4, but yes, I'm so excited for the next one. All right, next is another short one, and that is Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. First and foremost, I did not know that Marilyn Monroe was married to Arthur Miller. Hey, I wasn't alive, all right? I didn't know the drama back then, and they're not alive now, so why would I know it now? But lo and behold, they were married. Anywho, this I read in high school, just a quick little part of my AP English life, but it was so interesting then, and so I saw it at my library's bookstore, picked it up, and I loved it. Again, it was a very interesting experience because I've never read a play before. I usually just read historical fiction or more traditional layout. But this was spectacular to read. It was also something that I was kind of worried that I wouldn't get into because it is a play, and I was like, is it gonna be weird to read, you know, the stage directions? But it wasn't. This was also annotated. It's kind of interesting to see what someone else thought was interesting, or maybe they just had to do it for school. But either way, it was still interesting, and it was also one of those things where it didn't need to be any longer than it was. You know what I mean? It wrapped up nicely. Well, not nicely, given, you know, the title. But you know what I mean? It didn't make me feel like the ending should have been different. Like, I feel like it ended the way it did, and it was good. So smart. So smart words. You know what I mean. All right, next is kind of a recent read. I think I read this early November, and that is The Help by Kathryn Stockett. Now, this has been on my TBR for what seems like forever, and once again, saw it in my library bookstore, and I picked it up, and I loved it. Now, this is a thickie, but I was so interested in the story, you know what I mean? This is about a group of black maids living in Jackson, Mississippi in 1962, and they all come together to basically write a novel about what it's like working for white families and their experience being maids. It is very interesting. However, I feel like the ending for this one should have been a little different. It's a thinker, I'll tell you that much, but we're leading up to the book being finished and them writing this book, and then it basically ends when they finish writing the book. You know what I mean? There's no aftermath. They're all worried about this book coming out, and there's nothing really about what happens to these maids after the book comes out. So I would have liked that a little bit more, but the story was just interesting. I just love the drama of it all. But yeah, there was a couple, I mean, it wasn't super quotable because I was just like, you know, trying to read the story. Like, the writing for this was so good. There'd be parts where she would describe something or someone would say something and it would make me cry. It really, really would. This is a good description. I always thought insanity would be a dark, bitter feeling, but is drenching and delicious if you really roll around in it. I really like that description. Oh my god, no, this one actually broke my heart. So in this scene, 2 of the maids are talking about maybe potentially starting to work on this book. One of the maids says, I asked her, what if we told the truth? How we're too scared to ask for minimum wage, how nobody gets paid their social security, how it feels when your own boss be calling you. Abilene shakes her head. I'm glad she doesn't say it. How we love their kids when they're little. She says, and I see Abilene's lip tremble a little, and then they turn out just like their mamas. Anyways, this is a good book to read if you're really into the drama of this time period, because, and it was also very funny. I was really surprised by how funny it was, but it's a really hopeful book too. So highly encourage you guys to check this one out. All right, next is, I think, the first memoir I might have ever read. That's not really true. You Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This was amazing. It's another one of those things where you just have to keep reading what happens next. It's so well written, and part of me is like, how did you remember all of the little details of these events? Because I feel like I couldn't. It is such a gripping and interesting story that you can actually see it visually happening in real life, it feels like, you know what I mean? But if you guys don't know what this is about, Chanel Miller is the woman that was assaulted by Brock Turner in that Stanford case back in, I think, 2017. And basically she always went by Emily Doe because she didn't want her name to be out there in the world while this trial was going on and get a bunch of hate, and just to protect her safety and her privacy. But now the book title, Know My Name, she was like, this is who I am, this is what happened, and I'm going to tell you everything. And let me tell you, if it's another thing where if you want to get into maybe more nonfiction or memoirs, this is the one to start, because I started with this one and I was like, this is amazing. How can any other book live up to this? Because it was so well written and so easy to read. So I highly encourage you guys to pick this one up too. It is so accessible if you're not into nonfiction or memoirs. All right, taking a little bit of a turn from all the sad books. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl. I love this man. Roald Dahl. He's going places. You know, he's got some hits, he's got some bangers, but Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, well, let me say this. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, no, not the Johnny Depp one, the Gene Wilder one. That's my favorite movie of all time. It always has been, it always will be. I'm obsessed with that movie. And so I was like, hey, let's read the book, you know, where it all started. This was so much more funny than I thought it was gonna be. It's exactly like the movie. Willy Wonka is just a savage, you know what I mean? Everyone's like, oh my gosh, Veruca, like blah blah blah. Mr. Wonka's like, so anyways, let's just keep going on the tour because I just don't have time to deal with this. I love him, he's a baddie. Fun little read, but I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. Okay, so another one, I don't have the copy for it because I checked it out at my library, but that is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This is also something that has been on my TBR for what seems like forever, and I finally got to read it and I was so impressed. I was like, how old is this book? Because it's written incredibly modern. Although it's kind of like a dystopian setting, it felt very realistic, scaringly enough, and it felt like something I could connect to. I gave that one a 5 out of 5. That was an amazing read. The ending is a thinker, because I was like, I'm not too sure if I like the ending or not, but I think it's supposed to be left the way it is for a reason. I just don't know. So it is a thinker. I'm still thinking about it till this day, and I read it like 5 months ago. And that is the true sign of an amazing book, if you're still thinking about it ever since you read it. Okay, so another nonfiction book, I don't know if I would call this a memoir. It's more of like a science-y type of book. I don't know what I would call it, but it's called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and it is like about indigenous knowledge about the earth and our surroundings and basically the symbolism behind sweetgrass. Let me tell you, it was so beautifully written. Now, I'm not the biggest science nerd. I'll just say that up front. I am not, like, me and science do not connect. Like, we clash like there's no tomorrow. So I was very worried I wasn't going to like this. You know, I thought it was going to be a lot of big sciencey talk about the environment and plants and dirt and bugs and whatever. But it's not. It's like real life, her just finding beauty and reconnecting to her indigenous, you know, past and her indigenous roots, basically. And it's basically about finding joy and love and comfort in the simplicity of nature. And if that interests you, then you should read this book. It was spectacularly written. I listened to the audiobook for this, Chef's Kiss. It was amazing. It was amazing. Her voice is so soothing. Robin Wall Kimmerer, her voice is so soothing. I was just like, oh, it was like butter. I loved it. All right, another one that I read recently, but I don't have a copy of because, once again, the library. Get a library card, kids. You'll save yourself a lot of money. But that is another classic, And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. Now, story time. If you saw my book haul video that I did not too long ago, I talked about how I got Murder on Orient Express by Agatha Christie. But at that point in time, I had just finished reading And Then There Were None. I loved it. And I only read And Then There Were None because my library didn't have Murder on Orient Express, which is the first Agatha Christie I wanted to read for no good reason at all. But I'm so glad I read And Then There Were None first, because that one, I mean, at this point in time, I've already read Murder on Orient Express as well, and I did not like it as much as I liked And Then There Were None, because the way that it was written is not the same. It is written completely different. And Then There Were None, it was like, you really don't know. Everyone's just disappearing from the island. People are dying left and right. Who done it? There's no one else on the island but them. Is someone hiding? Who's killing everybody? And it was so intriguing, and I wish I could reread it again for the first time because it was so fascinating. I was like, all right, Alex, who is it gonna be? And it was so easy to read too that I was flying through the pages. I felt like I read that book super fast because I was like, I gotta know. I just got to know. So that was amazing. That's like a 5 out of 5 for me. That was, if I ever had to recommend like a mystery or an Agatha Christie, that would be the one I would go with. All right, next is one that I'm sure most of you have been curious about because I said I was currently reading it. And that was a while ago, and I never updated you. But I did end up finishing Salem's Lot by Stephen King. Now, a lot of people on YouTube said that this is the Stephen King book to start with if you're wanting to get into his books. And I'm really glad I did start with this one. This one was, again, really easy to read. I also had the audiobook as well, reading with this, because Lord knows I could not finish this just by visually, scanning it. But it does that thing that I love where there's parts and then there's tiny chapters within each part. One chapter will be right there, and then there's the next one. It's like that for every part basically, but it was a good classic vampire story. I kind of like the ending. I kind of like the way it was set up too, with the prologue and the epilogue and how everything played out, because at the end I really was like, okay, I see what you did there. That was pretty good. And this being my first Stephen King, I don't know if he does that in any other books, but since it's the first time I'm experiencing it with him, I don't know if he ties stuff up like that quite often, but I liked it. I'm pleased to say. If you have any other ones that are easy, accessible like this one, please let me know. I'm not going to read it though, because I'm scared. All right, next we have another memoir that I read this year, and that probably everyone's read this year, and that is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. This was so good. Again, the telling sign of a book being your favorite is if you keep thinking about it after you read it. I am still thinking about this, and I got this for my birthday in September, and I finished it in literally a couple days. I flew through this. First of all, amazing cover. I flew through this. It really helped that I already knew who she was prior. I knew some details of her life beforehand, but it just made me care so much more while reading, because I already kind of grew up with her on iCarly and Sam and Cat, and it just goes to show, like, you never know what's going on in someone's life. I mean, she is so strong and incredible and amazing, spectacular. I'm obsessed with Jennette McCurdy. Now, like, I really wish I could reread this book because it's so relatable and personable. It's like all the things that you would think about but you can never say out loud. Like she does it, and I just really I value her as a person. I value her telling her story, and she was funny, and she's so funny in this book too. I read a lot of books that surprised me by how funny they were, and this is one of them, considering the aspects of this story. Very not funny, very sad. So proceed with caution if you do. I would highly encourage you to look up trigger warnings or content warnings for this, but it was incredible. It was an incredible read. Okay, so another book that I read, this is the last book that I read recently, and that is Lonely Castle in the Mirror. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce this author's name because I don't want to completely butcher it, but oh my god, it was so good. I literally requested my library to get this book. I was like, can this happen please? And they finally called me and was like, we got the book. You're the only person that has it on hold. Do you want it? And I was like, yes, I do. So I don't have it, but now my library does have it, so other people in my area can experience this book. Oh my god, I am obsessed with books told from a child's perspective. Now, this has a little bit of a fantastical aspect, but it wasn't unreadable. It's very minimal and it didn't turn me off because usually fantasy stuff is not my cup of tea, but it was so amazing. It was so well written. It was also something where it's like, I gotta know what happens. I'm flying through it, and the way everything came together, you know, when you're watching a movie, reading a book, anything, and then the ending just ties everything up perfectly and you see all the connections. Ooh, that was this book. There could not have been a better ending for this book. It was a 5 out of 5 for me. I loved it so much and I want everyone else to read it. I'm obsessed. All right, so we are down to our final two, and I don't know if I can pick between these two because they are both #1s for me. So what the heck, I'm just gonna go ahead and say that they are both #1 for best book that I've read this year. One of them being East of Eden by John Steinbeck. Now, I talked about this in what I've been reading lately video, but this, I mean, I'm into just interesting stories. I mean, who isn't? Am I right? I was very surprised by this considering, you know, it is a classic, it is a thickie, it is an older book, but it was so interesting, and the amount of themes and symbolism in this book, holy crud. This is also something that I've not stopped thinking about since I read it, and I want to reread it already. I want to soak it all in. I want to be in the story again, even in the parts where it seems like it would be kind of boring, where they're talking about how poor the Hamiltons are, or how there's no water there, or the dirt, or whatever. I was like, this is interesting to me. Like I said, though, I am someone who loves classics, so take that with a grain of salt. This is literally one of the most harrowing and interesting stories I've ever read. And it is an accomplishment. I never listened to an audiobook for this one, all right? I physically read it. It was so readable. That was kind of something that was surprising for me. And it also does the amazing thing that I love, where there are chapters, and then with each chapter there are parts that are short. So you don't have to feel obligated to read a whole long ass chapter. There's little parts spewed throughout. So John Steinbeck. He might be one of my favorite authors. Everything I've read by him so far, I've really enjoyed. So he's going places. All right, and another one that I don't think I've ever talked about on this channel. I read this back in mother freaking January. It was the very first book that I read this year, and I cannot stop thinking about it. I want to reread it. I want it again in my life, and that is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. Holy crud, this book is so good. It is so descriptive in a good way, though. Not like Stephen King overly descriptive. It is amazingly descriptive. The imagery, like, you can literally lay out everything in your head. It is an amazing story. It is sad, heartbreaking. It is beautiful. It's everything that you would want in a book and more. I am obsessed with this book, but it is about William Shakespeare's son who died very young. His son was named Hamnet in the book, but Shakespeare eventually writes Hamlet, you know, kind of dedicated to his son. And in the book, they call him Hamnet, but we're obviously supposed to know that that is Hamlet. Same vice versa, you know what I mean? But this story is more specifically told from his wife's perspective. In the story, her name is Agnes. In real life, though, I believe her name was Anne Hathaway. But in the story, her name is Agnes. So the names are changed a little bit, and also William Shakespeare is never name dropped. It's just her husband. We understand, though, that it is William Shakespeare, of course, given the context, given the clues. If you don't even care about the story, at least read it for the writing, because the writing is impeccable. It is breathtaking. I listened to the audiobook of this. I tried to read it on an ebook, but it wasn't, I don't really like ebooks because I got a tiny phone. And I'm not reading something on my laptop, you know what I'm saying? Anyways, yeah, the audiobook for this was amazing, spectacular. I highly encourage you to check it out if my review about it right now hasn't convinced you enough. All right, so that is it. Those are the top 15 books that I read this year in 2022. Cannot wait to read more in 2023. Definitely going to be reading a lot more classics, hopefully a lot more horror or Stephen King, you know, just to really get the full horror vibe that we love on this channel. But if you have any other suggestions, let me know. I'd be very interested for that information. With that said and done, I want to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons, and especially to AJ, Mark Sylvester, Edward Fisher, and Terrell. Thank you so much, and make sure to go ahead and check out my Patreon if you haven't already. Alright, so what did you read this year? I would like to know. Once again, book recommendations are always welcome here on this channel. I think I gave you a good amount. I gave you like 15. So return the favor and we can be reading buddies. Thank you for coming along with me on this journey. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, do all of that jazz. And as always, thanks for watching.